The first thing I saw when I stepped into the living room was the banner. Bright, cheerful letters stretched across the wall. "Congratulations, loser!" My stomach dropped. My heart felt like it had been punched. I blinked. I laughed. The sound was sharp, nervous, and too loud. Everyone turned to look at me. My cousins froze, forks halfway to their mouths. My aunt smiled, just a little too wide, as if daring me to react. I couldn't move at first. My mind was a blur. Was this some kind of joke? Something meant to be funny? But the laughter around me sounded forced. I saw the smirks hiding in corners, the sideways glances, the whispered words meant to sting. It hit me. This wasn't harmless. This was meant to humiliate me. Seconds earlier, everything had seemed normal. I had walked in, excited to see everyone, to feel the warmth of family I hadn't seen in months. The smell of baked bread, the soft glow of string lights, the chatter of kids running between tables, all of it had promised comfort. And now it felt like a trap. I laughed again. This time it was louder, almost defiant. I let the sound fill the room, hoping it would cover the shock, the hurt. But inside, a quiet anger was settling. Not loud, not explosive, but a steady, burning sense of betrayal. I remembered why I was here. Not for the decorations, not for the smiles that felt fake, but for connection, for moments that mattered. And now, even that felt stolen from me. I drifted toward the kitchen, holding my laughter in check. I nodded at relatives, smiled at old friends, but my mind was elsewhere. I could see the banner out of the corner of my eye. Its words mocked me, but they also revealed something I hadn't noticed before. The cracks, the petty rivalries, the hidden judgments. I noticed the way my cousin looked at my uncle, like they shared some private understanding. I noticed my aunt's eyes flick toward the grown kids, silently comparing, weighing. The banner wasn't just a joke. It was part of a pattern, a signal, a test. I poured myself a glass of water and stared at it, like it held the answer to a puzzle I didn't yet understand. My hands trembled slightly. I felt exposed, small, but not defeated. Not yet. A little girl ran past, spilling juice on the floor. Everyone laughed. I smiled at her, genuinely this time. It reminded me of something important. Life didn't stop for betrayal. Life didn't pause for humiliation. And maybe, just maybe, the best response wasn't anger. The evening continued, a blur of cake, stories, and polite smiles. Yet, I was watching everything differently. Every whisper, every glance, every forced laugh became a clue. The moment of shame had shown me a side of my family I didn't want to see, and it had sparked something in me. By the time the toast came, I was ready. I held my glass and stepped forward. Everyone's eyes followed me. I could feel their anticipation, the unspoken challenge. They expected me to flinch, to crumble. Instead, I smiled. Not coldly, not bitterly, but warmly. I spoke. Not about the banner, not about the humiliation, not about the laughter that had stung. I spoke about memories, shared moments, kindnesses that had been overlooked. I spoke with honesty, with warmth, and in that moment, I could see doubt flicker across faces. My laughter had been disarming, but my words were starting to shift the room. Still, as the last words of my toast faded, I felt the pull of something else, a quiet promise, a sense that the night had changed, that things would never be the same. I didn't need to shout or act. The truth, the right timing, and the subtle moves I could make, those would be my weapons. I left the crowd for a moment and looked back at the banner. Congratulations, loser. The words didn't feel mocking anymore. They felt like a starting line, a challenge. And in that quiet moment, standing in the corner of the room, I made a decision. I would respond, but not with anger. I would respond with truth, patience, and strategy. And when it came, my answer would be undeniable, satisfying, and unforgettable. For now, I let the laughter around me continue. For now, I let the party play out. But I knew one thing. This story was just beginning, and the first move had already been made. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about the banner. Even in the quiet of my apartment, the words echoed in my mind, louder than the laughter that had followed them. I knew I couldn't move forward without understanding. Why had they done it? Who had helped plan it? And more than that, why had I never seen it coming? I sank into the couch and closed my eyes. The memories came, one after another, like a series of old home videos projected in my mind. I was 12, the first time I felt the shift. My cousin, the one who always laughed the loudest at my jokes, had quietly started excluding me from games. "You can't play this time," she said, shrugging as if it was nothing. I remember the sting of her words, the sharp ache in my chest. I had asked my mom later, why didn't she want me to play? "She's just having fun her own way," my mom said, brushing it off. But it never felt like that. It felt deliberate, like I had done something wrong without knowing what it was. I remembered another moment in high school. My aunt had called me into the kitchen to congratulate me on winning a small writing contest. Her smile had been warm, but I remember catching the glance she threw at my cousin, a glance that said, "Not so fast." Later, my cousin had made a joke in front of a family, one that made me look foolish. Everyone had laughed. I laughed too, because I didn't know what else to do. But inside, the betrayal cut deeper than I could say. Even the simple things had turned into reminders of my place in the family. The dinners where my ideas were ignored, the holidays where my contributions were dismissed, the small achievements that were minimized. I had loved these people, trusted them, wanted to belong, and all the while there had been this invisible current working against me. I opened my eyes and saw the city outside my window. The morning light felt too bright, almost exposing, and I realized how much I had lost. It wasn't tangible, like money or objects. It was trust. It was connection. It was the easy laughter and shared secrets that I had thought came naturally with family. They had been there once, and now that simplicity was gone. I remembered a conversation with my cousin just a week before the party. "You don't get it," she said, her tone sharp. "Things aren't the way you think." I laughed it off, thinking she was joking, but now I understood. She had been setting the stage for the moment in the living room, for the banner, for everyone else to see me through her lens. Another flashback hit me. A birthday party years ago. I had baked cookies for everyone, spending hours in the kitchen. I watched as my cookies were passed around, compliments given, smiles shared. But I also remembered the whispers. My aunt's voice, low enough that I didn't catch all of it. Why bother? It's not like anyone notices anyway. Even as a child, the words had cut. I felt the loss again, fully now. The loss of innocence, of belonging, of the simple assumption that family meant unconditional support. The banner wasn't just cruel, it was the culmination of years of subtle dismissals, sideways glances, and unspoken judgments. I stood and went to my bookshelf, fingers brushing against old photo albums. I opened one at random and froze. There, in faded pictures, were all the moments I had thought were shared happiness. Holidays, birthdays, summer trips. But something in the pictures caught my eye. Subtle, almost invisible, but there. My cousin whispering to my aunt, eyes flicking toward me, my laughter frozen in a smile that now felt forced. I flipped through more pages. Each picture told a story I hadn't noticed before. Small exchanges, small conspiracies. Not outright cruelty, but little acts that shaped perception, guided opinions, and quietly isolated me. I realized I hadn't lost trust overnight. I had been losing it for years, in moments too small to name until now. And then, at the very back of the album, I found something that shifted everything. A note tucked between the pages. A letter I hadn't read in years. It was from my grandmother, addressed to me. Always remember, the world may not see your value immediately, but truth and kindness last longer than laughter meant to wound. Never let small shadows stop your light. I held the letter in my hands and felt a spark of clarity. The betrayal wasn't the end. It was a mirror. It showed me what had been hidden, what had been lost, and what I still carried within me. My family had underestimated the quiet power of patience, of thought, of deliberate action. And now I understood that my path wasn't about proving them wrong with anger. It was about showing them the strength they had overlooked, the person I had become, despite it all. I leaned back, the letter clutched against my chest. The past was heavy, yes, but it had also left clues. It had left moments I could now read, understand, and use. And in that quiet morning, a plan began to form. Not a plan of revenge, not in a cruel sense, but a plan for truth to reveal itself in ways they wouldn't expect. Outside, the city moved on. Unaware. Inside, I felt a shift. The story was changing, and as I folded the letter and placed it back in the album, I knew one thing with certainty. The next time I faced them, the truth would be impossible to ignore. Back in the present, the morning after the party, I felt different. The sting of the Bonner had dulled, replaced by something sharper, a quiet determination. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was loud, messy, and fleeting. What I wanted now was clarity, balance, and a way to restore what had been taken from me. I walked through the apartment, letting the sunlight hit the corners of the room, thinking. Every memory from yesterday, every flashback from the past had formed a new map in my mind. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it showed where trust had been broken, where respect had been lost, and where the truth had been ignored. I knew the time had come to act, but not with cruelty. That was not my style. My action would be careful, deliberate, and undeniable. I began with small things, a message here, a suggestion there. I engaged with family members in ways that drew out honesty. I asked questions about events I had barely understood. Each conversation was a test, a gentle probe, a way to see how much they remembered and how much they had hidden. At first, the responses were casual, almost dismissive. "Oh, it's nothing," my cousin would say, smiling but not meeting my eyes. I listened carefully, noting every hesitation, every glance, every unspoken thought. I learned more from what wasn't said than from what was. I spent hours reflecting on the party, replaying it like a film in my head. The banner, the laughter, the fleeting expressions of my relatives, they were no longer just hurtful images. They were clues, pieces of a puzzle that, when assembled, revealed the subtle alliances, the whispered judgments, and the unintentional betrayals that had shaped my family for years. One afternoon, I returned to the photo albums. This time, I brought a notebook. I traced connections, writing down dates, events, conversations. I began to see patterns, little moments that once seemed insignificant. Who smiled at whom, who leaned closer, who whispered behind my back, they suddenly made sense.
The betrayal wasn't random. It had method. It had intention. But intention didn't equal permanence. Patterns could be shifted, perspectives could be altered, and truth had a way of rising to the surface. I started small experiments in my daily interactions, a compliment here, a shared memory there, a question that invited honesty. Each action was quiet but deliberate, a way of creating subtle ripples. I watched faces closely, noting how they responded, how their comfort shifted. It was fascinating to see how awareness and sincerity could gently disrupt the expectations they had set for me. I met with my cousin privately one evening. "I've been thinking about yesterday," I said calmly. "The banner, the laughter. It seemed like there were things you didn't tell me." She paused, frowning. "I don't know what you mean." "I do," I said. "I let my words linger. And that's fine, but I want us to be honest going forward. I'm not interested in anger or blame. I just want clarity." Her eyes shifted. For a moment, there was a flicker of surprise, maybe even concern. I smiled gently and left it there. That moment alone felt like a victory, quiet, understated, but significant. She had sensed the shift. She could feel that the game had changed. Every evening, I walked through my apartment slowly, replaying conversations in my mind, noting the small victories, the subtle shifts in tone. I was building momentum, not with confrontation, not with drama, but with truth, observation, and the steady accumulation of undeniable clarity. Then, one afternoon, as I reviewed a stack of old family letters and notes, I noticed something that made me stop. A name, a date, and a detail I hadn't caught before. It was a subtle reference, a clue buried in plain sight, a small admission from one of my relatives that hinted at the origins of the banner and the subtle campaign of mockery that had followed me over the years. I held the paper carefully, my fingers brushing the words. A slow smile spread across my face. This wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was a confirmation of what I had suspected all along. The betrayal had a source, and soon the truth would follow in ways that couldn't be ignored. I put the note aside and leaned back in my chair. The tension in my chest had shifted. Where there had once been hurt, there was now focus. Where there had once been confusion, there was clarity. And somewhere, I knew, the first ripple of awareness had already reached those who had tried to humiliate me. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the city, I imagined the next family gathering. The banner might appear, the laughter might start, but this time I would be ready, not to fight, not to shame, but to reveal, to allow the truth to speak louder than any mockery ever could. And as I folded the note and placed it carefully on my desk, I sensed it, an almost imperceptible shift. Someone had begun to notice the change in me. Someone had begun to understand that the quiet observer had become something different, not dangerous, not cruel, but unstoppable in patience, deliberate in action, and unshakably confident in the truth. The game had changed, and the first move had been made. The next family gathering wasn't loud. It wasn't full of balloons or laughter meant to sting. It was quiet, almost ordinary, with the smell of fresh bread and the faint hum of conversation. But I could feel the tension underneath, like electricity in the air before a storm. I spotted my cousin across the room, busy pouring tea for everyone. She didn't see me at first. I let the moment stretch. The banner incident had passed, but it lingered. Not as a wound, but as a truth waiting to be acknowledged. I walked over slowly, taking a deep breath. I didn't need to shout or make a scene. Quiet power carries farther than noise. "I want to talk," I said, calm but firm. She turned, startled, then forced a smile. "About what?" I said softly, "You know, about the banner, about everything that led to it." Her hands trembled slightly as she set the teapot down. I didn't mean for it to. It was supposed to be funny. I understand that. But it hurt. Not just yesterday, but for a long time.
and I think it's time we speak honestly about why." She swallowed hard, avoiding my gaze. "I didn't know you felt that way. I thought you would understand. Everyone's family jokes like that sometimes. They do. But this wasn't just a joke. It was the end of a pattern. And patterns matter." She looked at me, her eyes widening. For the first time, I saw uncertainty there, the kind that comes before realization. I didn't realize. I really didn't see it. I stayed calm. I let her process. "You weren't alone," I said. "I've noticed it for years. Small things, little exclusions, whispers, jokes meant to isolate. I didn't speak up then, but I saw it. And yesterday, the banner made it impossible to ignore." Her hands fell to her sides. The warmth in her forced smile had vanished. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was making it lighter, easier to laugh." "You were wrong," I said gently. "But I'm not angry. I'm just asking you to see the truth now, to understand how this is felt." She blinked, tears forming, though she didn't let them fall. I can't believe I didn't notice. I didn't mean to hurt you." I took a step closer. Intent doesn't erase impact, but awareness can change it. We can move forward if you see it, truly see it. She nodded slowly. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly. I see it now. I really do." "Good," I said. "Because this isn't about blame. It's about understanding and about trust. I want to rebuild that, but only if we are honest with each other." She looked at me for a long moment. Then her voice dropped, quiet and shaky. "I think I've been jealous. You were always confident, even when things were hard, and I wanted that attention too. I didn't know how else to get it." The admission hit softly, like a faint echo. Not explosive, not violent, but profound. I could feel the shift in the room, even in the stillness of our conversation. "I understand that too," I said, nodding. "Everyone wants recognition, but it shouldn't come at the cost of someone else. That's what yesterday made clear." Her hands fell down. I sorry. I don't just mean for yesterday. I mean for everything. I see now how my actions have shaped things differently than I intended. The quiet between us was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was full of honesty, of clarity, of the kind of understanding that only comes when truth is spoken and heard. I reached out, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Thank you for saying that, and thank you for listening. This is how change begins, not with anger, not with shame, but with understanding, with courage to see the past clearly." Her eyes glistened now, tears threatening. "I never realized how much I hurt you. You didn't have to realize immediately. It's enough that you do now. That's the first step." We stood there quietly, letting the words sink in. I could feel the emotional shift, subtle but undeniable. What had been a moment of betrayal had transformed into a moment of recognition. And somewhere in the room, the other family members felt it too. The tension, the truth, the shift. I finally pulled my hand back. "We can move forward," I said, "if we choose to, honestly and carefully." She nodded again, more firmly this time. "We will. I promise." And in that moment, something changed. Not with shouting or confrontation, but with quiet honesty. Not with anger, but with controlled power. The story no longer belonged to hurt and humiliation. It belonged to understanding, to clarity, to the possibility of reconciliation. The banner would never be funny again, but it didn't need to be. Its purpose had been served. The truth had been spoken, the betrayal acknowledged, and the room had shifted in a way that couldn't be undone. And as we turned back to the rest of the family, the weight in the air had changed. Eyes met mine differently now. Whispers faded.
Laughter became genuine, and the quiet promise of balance lingered, unspoken but undeniable. The story was no longer about the banner. It was about recognition, truth, and the first real steps toward a family that could see, understand, and grow together.
The quiet after the conversation lingered longer than I expected. I stayed in the corner of the room, sipping my tea, letting the words settle. Something in the way my cousin had spoken, the way she had admitted her jealousy, made me realize that I hadn't yet understood the full story. I asked her gently, "There's more, isn't there? Something I don't know." Her eyes flicked away, then back. She drew a breath and nodded. It wasn't just jealousy. There was confusion. I overheard things, bits of conversations that didn't make sense to me at the time, and I thought acting the way I did would protect someone else from disappointment. I didn't think it would hurt you. I leaned in, careful to stay calm. Protect who? Her voice was almost a whisper. Mom. She wanted to show everyone the perfect family, the perfect celebration. I thought if I made you the joke, the focus wouldn't be on her mistakes, on her struggles. I thought it would keep the family happy. I stared at her, letting it sink in. The betrayal hadn't been entirely selfish. It had been misguided, clumsy, and ultimately harmful. But it had been layered with fear, pressure, and misunderstanding. So, it wasn't personal? I asked, my voice steady. It became personal, though, didn't it? She admitted. Because I didn't stop to see how it felt for you. And I see that now. I should have stopped. I should have protected you instead. I nodded slowly. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment of truth, the layer of the story that made everything clearer. My anger and hurt didn't vanish, but they found a place in understanding. I could feel the weight of years of miscommunication lifting, just slightly, and a new clarity taking its place. We spoke for a long time, quietly, about the past, about the small moments that had piled up, about the misunderstandings that had turned into invisible walls. I asked questions. She answered honestly, sometimes with tears in her eyes. And as she spoke, I realized something important. The betrayal wasn't just about her choices. It was about all of us, about expectations, assumptions, and the stories we tell ourselves to justify behavior. We paused. The air was thick with reflection. I don't want this to be the end, I said. I want things to change, but it can't be only me forgiving. It has to be all of us, together. She nodded, her voice quiet. I understand. I want that too, and I'll do what I can. For the first time, I let myself imagine what that could look like. A family that could admit mistakes, accept each other's flaws, and still come together. The betrayal hadn't destroyed that possibility. It had just shown us where the cracks were. Then I thought about choice. This was my moment to decide. I could hold on to the pain, let it linger and fester, or I could respond with balance, with forgiveness, with a quiet statement that showed strength without cruelty. I looked at my cousin again. She wasn't perfect. She had made mistakes and she had caused real hurt, but she had also admitted it. She had shown awareness and willingness to change. That mattered more than any banner, any joke, any small act of exclusion. I exhaled slowly, letting my decision settle in my chest. I would forgive, not to erase the past, not to forget the pain, but to reclaim control over my own story, to show that integrity and compassion could outweigh misunderstanding and hurt. Yet, even as I made this choice internally, I knew the story wasn't fully finished. There were still conversations to have,
truths to share with the rest of the family, and moments that would reveal how deep the misunderstanding had gone. The balance wasn't complete. The consequences of the past were still being felt. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the fading sunlight. It was quiet now, almost serene, but I could feel the tension beneath it. Life was moving forward, yet the weight of the past lingered. I could hear the echoes of the party in my mind, the banner's words, the laughter that had stung, and I knew that the right choice, patience, forgiveness, and clarity, would shape the next steps. I turned back toward the room, toward my cousin, and toward the family that had unknowingly tested me for years. My choice was made, but the moment of revelation was still ahead. I could see it in the hesitant looks, the subtle glances, the whispered curiosity. Everyone would soon understand the layers of truth. And in that quiet pause, I felt a calm strength settling over me. Forgiveness wasn't weakness. It wasn't erasure. It was a quiet victory, a moral statement that would guide the next chapter. But the story itself, the full unfolding of consequences and awareness, was still waiting. The family, the betrayer, and even I had more to see, more to feel, and more to understand. The choice hung in the air, complete in my heart, but unfinished in the world. And as I took another slow breath, I knew that the next encounter would carry the weight of this decision, and it would change everything yet again.
The morning after our quiet conversation, the house felt different. Not louder, not brighter, but lighter. It was as if the tension that had clung to every corner had finally begun to lift. I walked slowly through the living room, noticing the little details I had ignored before. The soft pattern of sunlight across the floor, the faint scent of coffee lingering on the counter, the gentle hum of the refrigerator. Life had not changed overnight, but something inside me had. I found the letter from my grandmother tucked back in the photo album. I had held it before, but today it felt like more than words on paper. I sat at the table, unfolded it carefully, and read it again. Always remember, the world may not see your value immediately, but truth and kindness last longer than laughter meant to wound. Never let small shadows stop your light. Her words seemed to hum in the quiet room, guiding me. I realized that my decision to forgive, to face the betrayal with honesty rather than anger, was a reflection of the very lesson she had intended for me. This wasn't just closure for me, it was a restoration of balance. I returned the letter to its place, placing it between the pages with care. The gesture felt symbolic, like returning the wisdom of the past to its rightful home. And in that small act, I felt the last bit of weight on my chest begin to ease. Later, the family gathered in the kitchen, the way we had always done after meals. My cousin approached me again. She didn't speak immediately. She just held out her hands, awkwardly, as if unsure how to bridge the gap between past mistakes and future understanding. I smiled gently and took her hands in mine. I said, "We're learning, all of us, and that's okay. It doesn't erase what happened, but it changes what comes next." Her eyes glistened. "I want to do better. I really do." "And you will," I replied, squeezing her hands lightly. "We all can." The room was calm, filled with the ordinary sounds of family life, the clink of dishes, the shuffle of chairs, the quiet laughter of children playing in the corner. It was ordinary, yet profoundly different. The air carried a sense of honesty, of restored trust, and of quiet strength. I thought about the banner, now folded neatly and tucked away. It had been the spark, the symbol of past pain, but its power had faded. What mattered was the understanding, the dialogue, and the way we had faced truth together. The betrayal had been acknowledged, the lessons absorbed, and a new kind of peace had settled over us. Later, that evening, I stepped outside into the garden. The sunset painted the sky in soft shades of gold and pink. I carried a small envelope in my hands, a copy of the letter I had read.
now addressed to my cousin. It wasn't a reproach or a demand. It was a gift, a reminder of what we had learned together, a poetic gesture that words alone could not convey. I handed it quietly to her. She opened it and read, her lips moving slightly as she whispered the words to herself. A tear fell, but it wasn't sadness. It was recognition, understanding, renewal. I placed my hand briefly on her shoulder. I said, "This is our moment, a moment we can carry forward, not as a shadow of what went wrong, but as proof that we can choose balance, truth, and kindness." She nodded, her face reflecting gratitude and relief. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'll remember this." As I walked back inside, I felt the warmth of the evening settle around me. The house, the family, the history, it was all the same, yet it had transformed. What had begun as humiliation, betrayal, and misunderstanding had ended in clarity, compassion, and moral balance. I looked toward the living room where the party had taken place. No banner hung now, only the echoes of laughter, tempered by honesty and care. I understood then that revenge was never my goal. Truth, patience, and quiet justice were far more powerful. The light of understanding, stronger than any cruel joke, had illuminated the path forward. I sat in the chair near the window, watching the last rays of sunlight fade into the evening sky. The city outside was calm, but inside, I felt the fullness of closure. Peace wasn't loud or dramatic. It was steady, earned, and deeply satisfying. And as I exhaled slowly, letting the day settle into night, I whispered to myself, almost in awe, "Some victories don't need to shout. They simply shine."